Hey everybody, Mike here. Thanks for clicking on my video. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I come out with a couple of videos a week all about concrete stuff. If you're a returning visitor, I really appreciate you clicking back on my video, coming back and watching more. Let me know where you're from and what your name is down in the comments, please. So today we're going to talk about my top 5 concrete finishing tools for finishing or broom finishing a concrete slab like this. And for you guys in the south, I'll even add a bonus as a number 6 a little bit later in the video. But right now, I just want to show you how we pour a concrete slab. Now this could be a concrete slab for a generator like we're doing today. It could be a concrete slab for a hot tub, or it could be a concrete slab for a shed. All basically similar type slabs, similar size in slabs. Now the specs for this one called for this to be an 8-inch thick slab with a matter rebar in it tied 12 inches on center. And as you can see, I'm kind of pulling up on the rebar, getting the concrete under it as we're pouring it. And then we're trying to be careful, you know, not to re-step on it and push it back down too far. So trying to get it up towards the middle of the slab. And then we also have microfiber mesh in the concrete. I'm using a 4,000 PSI concrete. It's got water reducer in it. It's got air entrainment in it. We live in the north. We actually live in Maine, so all my pours are done in Maine. Goes through a lot of freeze and thaw cycles on this exterior concrete, and that plays a part in us finishing the concrete. I'll talk about that a little bit later when you have air entrainment in it, and why you guys in the south you might use one more tool than we do when you broom finish concrete. Now we came in, we laid down the styrofoam. The spec called for 2 inches of styrofoam. What that does is it helps prevent the frost from getting down under the concrete into the ground. It helps keep the ground from freezing, and it actually works really good. And then you know, we use 2x8s, number 4 steel, and we tied it with what we call wire ties. These yo-yo wire ties. We tied it all together. And that was part of our job, so we got it all prepped up the day before. And then, you know, we're actually a subcontractor on this job. We're working for the general contractor, and you know, they just hired us to come in and install the concrete slab. Someone else came in and did the earthwork, so they dug this out, put in a couple feet of gravel, put in the underground piping for the generator wiring, and then we came in and did our thing here. And today's the day to pour. So we got a front dump concrete truck today from a company we don't normally use. It was a little tricky. I mean, the driver doesn't really know our techniques about how much concrete we like and how much to get to fill it up to the top of the form, so we had to go back and forth with the chute a little bit. We have a lot of rear dumps here in Maine, so we're used to kind of controlling the chute and the speed of the concrete by telling the driver how fast we like to pour. So we got it though. This was small enough so it didn't really make that much of an issue. And then we set all the forms to grade using a laser level, and then we mag float the edges just to get them nice and smooth. So when we run our screed, we use a magnesium screed. When we run our screed over the top of the forms are nice and clean. You don't have to worry about pushing any rocks off or anything like that. And we left that a little bit low on purpose. Like, we didn't want to just fill this up and tell the guy to go ahead and go wash up, just in case we get too much. We didn't really want to make a mess of concrete on the outside of the form, so we're trying to get just as much concrete in there as we need. He had actually quite a bit left in his chute after we told him to shut the drum off. And I'm climbing up in the chute now to get a little bit more, because I know we need about half a wheelbarrow more. That way, when he does go over to wash his chutes, you know, he doesn't have a big pile of concrete there left on the ground somebody else has to clean up, which is more than likely be us. We're actually pouring a pretty, what we call pretty dry slump today compared to most of the pours we do. Since we have water reducer in the concrete, we can pour a pretty loose slump if we want to. But we kept this, that's probably, I don't know, 4.5, 5 slump. You concrete guys watching, what would you call that for a slump? I'd say it's around a 4.5, 5. Pretty good slump for something like this. You know, this is actually relatively easy to pour. The bigger stuff we do, you know, the bigger garage slabs, the bigger house floors, we loosen the slump up more, which that's what we really use water reducer for. So again, we're trying to get the concrete perfect. We don't want to leave a mess on the ground. He still has a little bit left in the chute if we need it. We're going to strike this off. Come to find out, we're just about a shovel full short. We scrape a little bit more down there. Fill that low area in, then we get the truck. He's got to move off site a little bit to go wash out, so we're just moving him off to go wash out. And then Darren's bull floating the concrete, and you can see most of the time, like on our normal slabs, we can just bull float. We can push that thing down, pull it back, and it's done. It's nice and smooth. In this case, where the mud is a lot stiffer, like Darren's having to go down and back multiple times to get it to where we like it. We like the concrete really smooth after we bull float. That just helps make the finishing process a little bit easier, especially when we're going to be in full sun like this the whole time. So he's, going down and back. Now we could add a little bit of weight to the bull float. That would help too. Sometimes we'll put those metal pins that we got holding the forms. We'll just drop a couple of them right on top of the bull float. And that helps weight it down, just makes bull floating a little bit easier. So that's a pro tip right there. If you need a little weight, just throw some of those metal pins in there. You can see as he goes back and forth over that area, how it smooths that out, kind of fills in any voids left by screeding. And then we'll come behind him with the mag floats, smooth it out the rest of the way. And so remember, I'm going to talk about my top 5 finishing tools for finishing a concrete slab like this, especially when you come to broom finish a concrete slab like this. That's going to be coming right up. So this is basically, the end of the pour. So from here, what we'll do is usually we'll take the string off, get that out of the way, maybe even unscrew those screws in the corners, get them out of the way. Obviously go wash the tools up, get the truck loaded. And then what I'm doing right now, so here we go. This is probably 30 minutes later. I'm measuring out, because we're going to cut a contraction joint right down the middle of this. So I'm measuring out the middle. I'm actually using the tape measure to make my marks. I'll put, if this thing was about 6 by 14, so I'll put my 7-foot mark right on the inside of the form, then use the end of the tape measure to make the mark. And then I can kind of eye my joint using one of the tools I'm talking about here. Okay, my top 5, and that's a walk behind joiner like this. So we just hook our handles to it. We're actually going to use a straight edge on this one just to make it really nice and straight. So tool number 1 is a walk behind jointer. And if you get on the concrete soon enough, if the concrete's soft enough, putting a joint in the concrete is actually really easy. The timing on this was pretty good. I mean, I probably could have hit it a few minutes earlier if I'd wanted to, but we like our techniques may be a little bit different than most. We like the concrete to have a little bit of firmness to it when we cut in joints, and also when we do our edges, as you'll see here in a second. I don't like doing these right completely after the pour when the concrete's still kind of wet. The joint kind of fills back in a little bit after that, and you just got to go back over it to open it back up. So here's tool number 2, a concrete edger. This one's by DeWalt. We use a lot of DeWalt finishing tools when we go to finish. DeWalt has a lot of concrete finishing tools now. Those are actually my DeWalt gloves right there on the styrofoam. Great gloves. So tool number 1 is the walk behind joiner. Tool number 2 is the concrete edger. As you can see, Darren's rounding the edges. We do these on all our broom finish patio slabs, generator slabs, shed slabs, hot tub slabs. And then tool number 3 is the mag float that Luke has in his hand right now. Another tool, concrete finishing tool by DeWalt that we're using. So we'll mag float out the surface. And there's another way to mag float out the middle part of the concrete that, let's say, you can't reach by hand from the outside. And I'm going to be showing you that in a second right here. This is what we call a funny float. And that hooks to the same handles as the walk behind joiner. So tool number 1 was the walk behind joiner. Tool number 2 was the concrete edger. Tool number 3 was the hand mag float. And tool number 4 is this funny float that we're using. So those are 4 really essential tools when you go to finish concrete, put a broom finish on it. Now I got one more that we use that I'm going to talk to you about in just a second. And then a lot of guys in the South, they'll use another one. And I mean, that's perfectly fine for them. If you don't have air entrainment in your concrete, it's okay. Up here where we do have air entrainment, we don't like to use that 6th tool I'm going to be talking about, and I'll tell you why here in a second. So Luke's, you know, being really fussy with the joint. He's kind of touching the joint up, making it look nice and smooth right around. We like to make sure it's nice, the concrete's nice and flat around there. We'll run that joiner through it as many times as we need to make sure the joint looks really nice and tight, as you'll see at the end of the video. And then we'll go around and we'll mag float the edges as Darren puts the edger mark on them. We'll mag float that out nice and smooth and take the edger mark out. And then later on, you can decide, after you put a broom finish on this, you can decide if you want to picture frame this with the finished edger mark and the finished groove mark, or if you just want to leave it kind of industrial looking, kind of like what we're going to do, just because this is a generator pad. We're actually trying to match that pad in the back, is what the owners of the building wanted us to do. So you'll see at the end here that we did not leave a finished edger mark or a finished groover mark, because that pad in the back didn't have those either. They just had the broom finish. The concrete was actually pretty decent to finish. Most of the 4,000 PSI concretes we use are pretty creamy. They have quite a bit of paste on top. They have enough moisture on top that they work up pretty good just with the mag float. So we can actually get them really nice and smooth by just mag floating them. And one of the things we rarely ever do in the north with air entrainment is steel trowel our concrete or fresno our concrete smooth before we do a final finish. And one of the reasons for that is, you know, air entrainment in concrete is actually tiny little air bubbles in the concrete. They inject tiny little air bubbles in the concrete, and that's to help protect it against freezing and thawing by allowing water to soak down into the concrete in the winter and freeze and expand without popping the surface of the concrete. That's what those little microscopic air bubbles are for. Well, as you're finishing concrete like this, some of that air is escaping, you know, it's just popping out of the surface as you're finishing. And what we don't like to do is we don't like to seal off the surface with a nice smooth steel trowel finish and possibly trap some of that air right under the surface before we put the finish on. So we just keep the surface as open as possible just by using mag floats. And I know the argument is, well, if you're going to broom finish right over the steel trowel afterwards, aren't you reopening the surface? Well, possibly, but our experience in the past, like way in the past, our experience has found that even by brooming over it, sometimes air does get trapped and you end up getting spalling, peeling, popping of the surface afterwards, like a year after, versus just mag floating like this and brooming over it. So that's why, you know, we can get a really nice tight broom finish just by mag floating. And if we don't feel like mag floating it once is enough, we'll just let this set up for 15-20 minutes, just re-mag float it again, and then run the broom over it. So the tool number 5 I'm talking about is a concrete broom, just like that right there. This one's a 2-footer. I have links for all this stuff down in the description of the video, so you hit the show more button, all the description shows up, all my links for all these tools show up. My private training shows up, the Concrete Underground. If you really want to learn how to do this step by step, I can teach you in there. But tool number 5 is that concrete finishing broom. And then as a bonus for you guys that don't have freeze and thaw cycles like this, you know, tool number 6 and 6A would be like a hand trowel or a fresno. So if you don't have air entrainment in your concrete, you don't really have any risk of trapping air under the surface. So you could fresno this. You know, right after Luke's over there on the right mag floating, you know, you could run a fresno over this, get it really nice and smooth, or you could steel trowel it, get it really nice and smooth, and then your broom finish is going to be really tight if that's what you want to do. We've had really good luck doing it this way with this technique, really good broom finishes, and we don't usually have any trouble with freezing and thawing later on down the road, you know, a year later. This should still have some type of sealer on it later on, whether it's like a salt guard type of sealer or, you know, just a basic simple acrylic type of sealer. And what that's going to do is it's going to help shed the water, and have the water will run off a little bit better, a little bit quicker than if you don't seal it. If you don't seal this thing, it's going to be like a sponge. It's just going to absorb water. Water's going to soak right into it, and it's just going to evaporate. Or in the winter, let's say up here in Maine, late November, we're starting to get freezing temps below after dark, you know, at nighttime. So late November, you know, December, January, February, March, you're going to go through all kinds of freezing and thawing. And if there's any moisture in that concrete, that moisture is going to want to expand. And eventually, you know, it's going to do some damage if you don't properly finish the concrete, or if it doesn't have the right amount of air entrainment in it. So just putting some sealer on it's going to help shed that water, whether it's from, you know, rain, ice, snow, whatever it's from. It's going to help shed that quicker. And that's how we do a basic broom finish right there. We'll just, you know, we'll mag float it out, get a really nice smooth finish on the surface from magging it. And if we feel that, you know, there's enough paste on the surface, which today there was, that 4,000 psi was really nice finishing concrete. You know, we can just lightly drag the broom over it. I have a really special technique I use that I talk about in the Concrete Underground about getting good broom finishes too. It's not a matter of just simply setting it down and dragging it. There's actually a good technique to doing it right. And then Luke's just touching up around that area where the pipes were. They wanted, you know, to be able to pull that styrofoam out and just have all kinds of room to work in there later on. So that's why we kind of boxed that out with some styrofoam. That styrofoam, you're just going to be able to rip right out of there really easy, versus if you use 2x4 wood material, that's a lot more difficult to get out of there. But I mean, that's basically it. So we edged it, we put a joint in it, we got the broom finish marks on it. I talked about my top 5 tools. So again, if you want to learn how to do this step by step, join the Concrete Underground below. Leave me a comment down below saying where you're from. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.